Can a book really unlock the secrets to getting rich? It's a question, many of you have probably pondered as you navigate the world of finance and ambition. Today, we're diving deep into a source that claims it holds some of those answers. How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. What's immediately interesting is that Dennis wasn't your typical financial guru. He was a self-made millionaire who didn't have a college education or start with any inherited wealth.
What's fascinating right from the start is that Dennis himself seems aware that you might be skeptical. He mentions in the book that his reasons for writing weren't purely altruistic. He enjoyed writing about his own journey, and he genuinely believed that, well, many people could become wealthy with the right motivation and effort.
Exactly. And he's very upfront about what this book isn't. You won't find any complicated business jargon, no shady get-rich-quick schemes with hidden catches, and definitely no need for any, mystical practices. It feels like a very direct, unfiltered look at how he approached building his fortune.
It's important for you to understand his context as well. He was writing this from his property in Mustique, a beautiful Caribbean island, complete with a writer's cottage and a, well, rather impressive wine cellar, as he mentions, all of which, he points out with a bit of irony, comes with a significant price tag. So he's living the lifestyle as he's explaining how you might achieve it.
And he doesn't shy away from the less glamorous side, mentioning he had $30 million in debt at one point. It's a stark reminder for you that the public image of wealth often doesn't tell the whole story. But what I found particularly engaging in the beginning is how he directly addresses the idea that someone without traditional advantages, the fancy degrees or initial capital, can actually become rich. That's the core of what we're exploring for you today.
This immediately brings up the common beliefs about how people get rich, doesn't it? Dennis tackles those head on. He dismisses the idea that you just, accidentally stumble into wealth, or that having one single great idea is the magic formula.
Absolutely. He pretty much waves away the notion of accidental wealth. And when it comes to the great idea, he uses his own Spider-Man gun concept as a perfect illustration. It might sound fun, maybe even profitable, but ultimately, it's the doing that matters.
Right.
He argues that the execution of an idea is far, far more important than the initial spark of inspiration. His advice is essentially, stop just thinking about it and get busy getting rich.
What's fascinating early on is an observation he makes about confidence. He notices a certain self-assuredness in firstborn children, and more relevantly for you, he links the same kind of confidence to wealthy individuals, regardless of how they accumulated their wealth.
Right. He paints these little scenarios for you. Imagine a wealthy person walking into a brand new high-end hotel or restaurant. They just seem completely at ease, don't they? Or he talks about wealthy women in charity shops who haggle quite vigorously over designer clothes. It's a behavioral pattern he noticed, almost as if wealth cultivates, or perhaps reflects, a different way of interacting with the world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture for you, it makes you wonder if this confidence isn't both something that helps you acquire wealth and something you develop as a result of having it. That feeling of security and perhaps a sense of entitlement could definitely fuel bolder actions and decisions.
Okay, let's unpack how Dennis actually defines rich, because he doesn't just use it loosely. He breaks it down into these really interesting levels, from what he terms the comfortable poor all the way up to the super rich. And he even provides tables outlining the different asset values for each.
What's crucial for you to understand here is the distinction he makes between your total asset value, things like property or investments, and your quickly realizable net worth, which is, how much cash you could actually access quickly. He emphasizes that a significant portion of someone's wealth might be tied up in assets that aren't easy to convert to cash. Then, of course, you have the impact of taxation, capital gains tax, which, for you listening, is the tax you pay on the profit you make when you sell an asset, and inheritance taxes, all of which can significantly reduce the apparent wealth on paper.
It's almost eye-opening when he points out that even the super rich might not know their exact up-to-the-minute net worth until they actually start selling off major assets. It's a level of financial complexity that's probably hard for most of us to fully grasp.
This raises an important question for you about how you might personally define wealth. We often see those big headline figures, but Dennis gives you a much more practical and, well, nuanced understanding of what rich actually means in real terms.
So imagine you're young, maybe a bit short on cash, and the idea of getting rich feels like an impossible task. Dennis directly addresses this initial hurdle of getting started, especially for those who are young and don't have much money. And surprisingly, he actually sees some real advantages in that position for you.
What's fascinating for you to consider is his point about a lack of prior expertise actually being a benefit. Young people are often more open to learning new things, less afraid of making mistakes because they don't have an established reputation to
Right,
protect.
no baggage.
Exactly. And crucially, as he points out, they don't have a long track record of past successes or failures to feel constrained by. This freedom can be incredibly powerful for you.
He contrasts this with the hesitation he often observes in people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. It seems that the fear of losing the stability they've already built up can become a much stronger obstacle than the desire for even greater wealth.
Mm,
It's that classic risk-reward calculation, isn't it?
yeah.
But with the emphasis often shifting towards protecting what they already have.
This connects directly to what he calls the 800-pound gorilla, the fear of failure. He paints a vivid picture for you of how the desire to avoid blame, both your own internal criticism and public judgment, can lead to paralysis, to a complete lack of action.
And his anecdote about forming a committee to investigate a new business idea,
Hmm.
he pretty much labels that as a sure sign that the idea will never see the light of day.
Yeah.
It becomes more about everyone covering their backs and avoiding potential blame than about actually fostering innovation. And then there's his little poem, Knowing Isn't Doing, which really drives home for you that understanding something intellectually isn't enough. You have to actually take action.
The two components of this fear that he highlights are particularly insightful for you to consider. First, the fear of letting yourself or others down financially, which is a very personal and tangible worry. And second, the fear of public exposure, of the judgment that might come if a venture fails. He specifically uses the example of your career decisions, something I'm sure many of you listening can relate to.
It definitely resonates. And speaking of missed opportunities, his own story about being dissuaded from starting a computer magazine is almost hard to hear, especially knowing how massive that industry became.
Yeah, painful.
He ended up having to buy a stake in personal computer world, later on a pretty costly lesson for him in letting fear prevent him from acting on an early insight.
What's interesting for you to note is his perspective on his own employees who left to start their own businesses. Instead of feeling resentful, he actually expresses pride in their initiative and drive. But there's also a pragmatic element, a fear of missing out on potential market opportunities and, a chance to learn from their new ventures.
It's a very practical approach, isn't it? It's not purely selfless, but it's certainly not the cutthroat reaction you might expect. It's almost like he sees the entrepreneurial spirit as a powerful force, and trying to suppress it is ultimately not a smart move for anyone involved.
All of this leads into the crucial importance of your mindset. He lays out these essential mental attributes for you. First, you need to convince yourself that you are good enough to become rich. Second, try to treat the entire process like a game to help you detach emotionally from setbacks. And third, you have to directly confront and work through your fear of failure.
And he includes that really powerful Kipling quote from If about treating both triumph and disaster as the imposters they are. It really speaks to the emotional resilience that you'll need on this journey. But he also emphasizes that getting rich requires sacrifice. And it's not always just you who's making those sacrifices. It can have an impact on the people around you as well.
This raises an important point for you to consider about the potential social costs that can come with the pursuit of extreme wealth, something that Dennis doesn't shy away from acknowledging in his book.
Now let's talk about taking that first step. How do you actually get things moving? Dennis talks about the tendency to overthink and procrastinate, and he uses a great analogy for you. Waiting for Godot. That endless state of just waiting for something to happen without ever taking any real action.
The humorous story he shares about his godchild wanting to be a rap god and pimp half your brownies really cuts through a lot of the often stuffy advice you hear about career planning, doesn't it? It highlights for you the contrast between the unrestrained ambition of youth and more conventional expectations.
Exactly. And his point is clear for you. Focus on actually doing something, even if your initial ideas don't seem groundbreaking. He mentions the launch of Star Hits magazine, which was very closely linked to the already successful Smash Hits. It wasn't a completely original concept, but it worked because they took that initial leap and acted on it.
What's interesting for you to think about is his emphasis on finding opportunities in sectors that might not seem particularly glamorous. He uses the example of the packaged goods industry, which, yeah, might not sound exciting, but it can be incredibly profitable and tends to have consistent growth.
It's a good reminder for you that the most financially rewarding paths aren't always the most visible or the ones that everyone is talking about. He stresses that you should look for a growing segment within any industry, no matter how big or small the overall industry might be. And then he throws in that wonderfully cynical description of investors and venture capitalists for users with umbrellas.
Huh. That perfectly captures for you the often conditional nature of early stage funding. They're eager to help when things look promising, but they can be quick to withdraw support when difficulties arise.
This leads us to the initial stage of trying to find a viable business idea and, of course, the constant need for capital. He refers back to the early days of personal computing for you, when the pioneers were often just tinkering away in their basements and garages.
What should stand out for you here is the importance of seizing opportunities and being willing to go against established norms. He brings up figures like Henry Ford, Reuben Rousing, who created Tetra Pak, and Bill Gates, individuals who saw potential where others didn't and weren't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom.
And he touches on the role of luck for you, famously saying, Lady Luck is bald behind. It's a funny image, but the underlying message for you is about being prepared and being bold. You need to be ready to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself.
This brings him back to the idea that just having a great idea isn't enough for you. He uses Ray Kroc and McDonald's as a prime example. Kroc didn't invent the concept of fast food, but his incredibly disciplined execution and standardization of the entire system turned it into a global phenomenon.
It really underscores for you that implementation is key. You can have the most brilliant idea in the world, but without the hard work and strategic execution, it's likely to just remain an idea.
Now, Dennis also delves into the potential dangers for you of ignoring the successes of others and not learning from their strategies. He shares a very candid example of how Dennis Publishing struggled in the games magazine market because they were reluctant to adopt Future Publishing's licensing
It's
strategy.
a really honest admission for you to hear. They were hesitant to follow Future's approach of acquiring official licenses for the games, and it ultimately cost them significantly.
Mm.
They basically got pasted, as he frankly puts it. And then he gives the example of IPC emulating Loaded magazine with FHM, showing how learning from a competitor's success, even in a seemingly controversial area, can be a smart move for you.
This highlights for you the importance of being adaptable and not letting pride or a feeling of being different prevent you from adopting successful strategies that others in your industry are using.
And then there's the Steve Jobs anecdote, which offers a fascinating and perhaps slightly debatable perspective for you on Apple's early dominance and its subsequent smaller market share. Dennis suggests that this was partly due to Jobs' reluctance to admit mistakes, specifically his decision to keep the early Macintosh systems as closed boxes and not license the Mac OS to other manufacturers.
This raises an interesting point for you to consider about the balance between having a strong vision and being pragmatic. While Jobs' unwavering belief in his vision certainly drove incredible innovation, Dennis suggests that a bit more flexibility and a willingness to adapt might have led to even greater market share for Apple in the long run.
He brings in the Emerson quote about building a better mousetrap, and then he counters it by really emphasizing the action verb make. The idea, no matter how brilliant it is in your head, is ultimately useless unless it's actually brought into existence and made accessible to people.
Yeah.
And he briefly mentions Google's famous 20% time policy, hinting at the potential for fostering internal entrepreneurship within larger companies, something for you to think about in your own career.
This naturally leads into the crucial topic for you of how to obtain capital. Dennis famously lists the 6 ways: given inherit, steal, win, marry, earn, and borrow. He quickly dismisses the first 4 as not being the focus of his book, and he has a particularly low opinion of winning it through gambling for you.
So that leaves earning and borrowing as the main avenues he explores for you. And he includes this almost whimsical little thought about fleas and bigger fleas, which illustrates for you the hierarchical nature of capitalism and the constant need for capital at various levels.
This sets the stage for you as he discusses his own early business ventures, such as the launch of Cosmic Comics with very little initial capital. It's a story of being resourceful, persistent, and really leveraging the cooperation of others. He points out for you how human nature can often be surprisingly cooperative, especially towards young, determined entrepreneurs.
And those early relationships had significant long-term benefits for him, as he illustrates for you with the example of his legal advisors, Simons, Muirhead, and Burton, who were founded by the very lawyer who helped him register his first company. It really underscores for you the value of building and maintaining good relationships right from the start.
What should really strike you in this section is his emphasis on unwavering determination, that I will not give in attitude. He shares his personal vow during a difficult economic period in Britain, refusing to become just an employee, a wage slave, as he calls it, even when he was facing significant financial pressure and tempting job offers.
It's that sheer grit and refusal to be defeated that seems to be a recurring theme in his journey for you. And he contrasts this with the trap of just wishing versus actually doing. He cautions you against constantly fantasizing about success without taking any concrete steps, as this can actually erode your confidence over time.
He also touches on the regret that many people feel later in life if they pursued unfulfilling careers because of external pressures, emphasizing for you the importance of having an internal compulsion, a real drive, rather than in just a fleeting desire when you're embarking on the challenging path to wealth.
Now, getting into the practicalities of running a business for you, Dennis really stresses the vital importance of managing your cash flow. Even for someone like him who admits he wasn't a natural with numbers, he understood how critical it was and knew when it was essential to bring in someone who was good at it.
He strongly advises you against using factoring, which, for you listening, is a way for businesses to get immediate cash by selling their accounts receivable at a discount, except in absolutely dire circumstances, comparing it to making a deal with the devil. And he emphasizes that monitoring and forecasting your cash flow isn't something you can just delegate. It's a personal responsibility for you as an entrepreneur.
And then there's what he calls the third error, reinforcing failure. This is a mistake of continuing to pour money and effort into failing ventures for too long. He uses his Blender CD-ROM project as a prime example for you. It got a lot of media attention, but just didn't connect with customers.
It's a classic illustration for you of getting emotionally attached to a project despite clear signs that it's not succeeding. He contrasts this with the surprising longevity of Kung Fu Monthly, which initially faced skepticism but found a dedicated audience due to the enduring popularity of Bruce Lee.
This really highlights for you how difficult it can be to know when to change course and when to stick with something. Sometimes what seems like a bad idea can actually find its niche, and the opposite can also be true.
Dennis also shares his own personal experience with the dangers for you of acting big too soon after achieving some initial financial success with Kung Fu Monthly. He admits to reckless spending and losing his focus.
It's a very honest and cautionary tale for you. The need to stay grounded and maintain a healthy respect for money, even after you've achieved a certain level of wealth. He essentially had to pull himself back from potentially losing everything by remembering the importance of keeping his expenses in check.
This naturally leads to the crucial topic for you of hiring and retaining talented people. He emphasizes that having talented individuals on your team is essential for building significant wealth and shares a story about going to great lengths to keep a valuable employee.
His advice for you on identifying, hiring, nurturing, rewarding, and protecting talent is pretty straightforward. He even makes the point that sometimes young, highly capable individuals might be initially underpaid if the work they're doing is challenging and provides significant learning opportunities.
While he emphasizes persistence as a key trait for you, he also acknowledges that it has its limits. There are times when giving up, even though it's difficult, is the right decision. He uses the analogy for you of a dotted line on a map representing potential future riches that ultimately might not be worth the effort to pursue. And he includes that famous Winston Churchill quote about the importance of self-belief for you.
On the subject of building your self-belief, he shares his own experience of nearly dying from Legionnaire's disease and his somewhat humorous reaction while in the hospital. He suggests to you that surviving a serious life-threatening event can paradoxically free you from many everyday fears, ultimately strengthening your belief in your own resilience and capabilities.
This idea for you of a wake-up call leading to increased self-belief is a powerful one. It's about gaining a new perspective on what's truly important and what you're actually capable of overcoming when faced with adversity.
Dennis also discusses the value for you of focused effort and trusting your own instincts. He recounts his investment in The Week magazine, which initially lost money but eventually became his most profitable venture in the UK. It was a situation where he stuck with something he strongly believed in, even when it went against conventional wisdom and initial results.
This underscores for you the importance of having conviction in your own judgment and not always being swayed by short-term setbacks or the opinions of others. Sometimes you have to trust your gut feeling, even if it seems like a risky move at the time.
And then comes the essential strategy for you of diversification. He uses the phrase, make more baskets. He explains why it's so important to spread your efforts across multiple ventures to increase your overall chances of success and to give you the confidence to address projects that might be struggling. He points to Richard Branson as a positive example for you, but also admits his own regret about missing out on early internet startup opportunities.
The key takeaway here for you is not to become too emotionally attached to any single business, not to think of it as an irreplaceable child. Diversification provides you with greater flexibility and resilience in the often unpredictable world of business.
On the topic of ideas generated by employees for you, Dennis clarifies that typically any ideas created by people while they are working for your company usually belong to the company itself. This reinforces his earlier advice for you about the importance of hiring talented individuals. Their creativity and ideas ultimately contribute to the success of your business.
He then delves into the different kinds of luck for you, good luck, bad luck, and even what appears to be bad luck initially, but turns out to be beneficial in the long run. He uses his own experience with Legionnaire's disease as an example of this luck in disguise for you, as it forced him to make lifestyle changes that likely improved his health.
And he brings in Seneca's famous quote for you about luck being what happens when preparation meets opportunity, emphasizing how crucial it is for you to be ready to capitalize when a favorable moment arises. He cautions you against being so caught up in the minor details of your daily work that you miss those significant opportunities when they appear.
He contrasts his own approach to luck for you with that of his unlucky friend Albert, who constantly changes his business direction instead of persevering with any one thing. He highlights Albert's tendency towards perfectionism and his reluctance to delegate tasks as major factors that hindered his success for you.
It's a cautionary tale for you about the dangers of constantly chasing the next new and exciting thing, and the importance of sticking with a venture long enough to give it a real chance, while also being realistic about when it's necessary to pivot. And he reminds you that in the grand scheme of things, individual wealth is temporary.
So, what are his final thoughts on how you can get rich? He boils it down to a series of key pieces of advice for you. Prepare yourself for opportunities, but don't just passively wait for luck. Actively work to create your own luck. Avoid negativity at all costs. Be bold in your actions, stay the course when things get tough, and learn how to effectively delegate tasks to others.
And when it comes to negotiation for you, he calls it a necessary evil, stating that all negotiations essentially arise from a position of weakness on at least one side. He advises you to set clear limits before you begin, trust your initial instinct about a deal, and always do thorough research beforehand.
But perhaps his most emphatic point for you is about ownership. He states unequivocally, ownership is not the most important thing. It is the only thing that counts. He shares a dramatic story for you about firing colleagues who requested a 20% stake in his business, highlighting the immense long-term financial implications of diluting your ownership.
It's a really stark illustration for you of his unwavering belief in maintaining control of your ventures. He contrasts his approach of 100% ownership in his UK businesses with his willingness to share ownership with trusted partners, Peter and Bob, in the US, suggesting a more flexible approach based on the specific circumstances and the individuals involved. He even mentions the rather intense-sounding Mexican shootout clause they had for resolving any major disagreements between shareholders, though he doesn't go into the specifics of what that entails for you.
This leads into an important discussion for you about the fundamental differences between running a private company and taking a company public. He emphasizes the increased scrutiny, the added regulations, and the intense focus on growth at any price that public companies face, often even if it means sacrificing short-term profits. He briefly recounts his own experience with his company Micro Warehouse going public and his eventual feeling of relief when he sold his shares.
And when it comes to delegation for you, he explains the often understated reasons why many business owners are reluctant to delegate tasks, which often stem from a fear of losing power rather than a focus on what will ultimately generate more wealth for the owner. He stresses the significant benefits of effective delegation for you as a company owner and shares his own somewhat unconventional methods for managing his businesses from a distance.
He also makes a really insightful point for you about reconsidering your priorities beyond just money when it comes to your employees. He acknowledges that not everyone is solely motivated by financial rewards. Factors like job security, feeling respected, and having opportunities for learning and growth can be equally important for your team.
He then touches briefly on the philosophical question for you of whether the relentless pursuit of wealth is even ultimately worth it, noting his own later shift towards writing poetry. And then he addresses the unavoidable reality of competition for you. He explained its crucial role in preventing capitalism from becoming monopolistic, and shares a detailed account of his experiences competing with VNU and later facing the significant threat from Ziff Davis in the publishing world.
The financial cost of that intense competition against Ziff Davis, 2 entire years' worth of profits, really underscores for you the high stakes and the financial intensity of competition at that level. He candidly admits that, looking back, perhaps joining forces might have been the more financially sensible decision, even though it would have meant giving up some independence.
He then distills some of his key advice into a section titled 21 Ways to Make More Pie, offering some very practical tips for you on things like being generous with bonuses for high-performing staff, ring-fencing your investment costs, being decisive in firing underperforming employees, being cautious with company perks, and offering unusual self-funded benefits to your team.
He returns to the powerful concepts for you of focus and timing, using a memorable analogy he calls the money is here ball, emphasizing the importance of concentrating on your core profitable business. The story of the Bruce Lee biography coinciding with his sudden and unexpected death is a stark example for you of just how crucial timing can be in business, even when it involves an element of unforeseen luck.
He emphasizes for you the critical need for collaboration, pointing out that building substantial wealth usually requires a team effort, including having the right legal and financial professionals advising you. And his advice on hiring for you is quite direct. Prioritize hiring winners, put aside any personal prejudices you might have, and look to promote from within your organization whenever possible.
On the less pleasant but necessary topic for you of troubleshooting, he discusses the often hidden costs associated with closing down a failing business, such as ongoing subscription liabilities. He shares a specific example for you of the lengthy and expensive process of shutting down one of his struggling magazines and briefly touches on the possibility of bankruptcy and the importance of treating your suppliers fairly, even when things are going badly.
He emphasizes for you the absolutely crucial need to keep your personal and business finances completely separate, even if you're the sole owner of your company. He also stresses the importance of paying your taxes correctly and being aware of the increased financial scrutiny that very wealthy individuals often face.
Reflecting on the finite nature of time for you, he poses a really important question. Is it truly worth spending your entire youth solely focused on the pursuit of wealth? He highlights the ultimate trade-off for you. The time you dedicate to getting rich is time that you can never get back.
He delves into the demands that wealth itself can bring for you, suggesting that it comes with its own set of constraints and potential loss of personal freedom, and he quotes John Donne on this very idea. He also addresses the often difficult but sometimes necessary step of cutting loose from working for others and sometimes even from significant personal relationships.
He advises you on the importance of choosing the right mine to dig in a business area that has the potential for generating wealth and that also aligns with your own instincts and interests, even if it doesn't seem particularly glamorous on the surface. And he cautions you against trying to pursue money in areas where you have no personal empathy or understanding.
He concludes for you with a philosophical perspective on fear. He titles the chapter Fear Nothing, acknowledging its powerful influence on our lives, but also reminding you of the relative insignificance of individual lives within the vastness of the universe. He reiterates that fear is often the biggest obstacle that holds us back. He also briefly touches on the lasting value of creation and contribution beyond just financial success, and challenges the materialistic notion that whoever dies with the most toys wins.
Finally, he shares some advice for you on how to stay rich and relatively sane after you've achieved wealth. Keep giving some of it away, prioritize your financial security, and never stop looking for and nurturing talented people around you. He ends with a memorable lighthouse anecdote for you about the dangers of becoming overconfident once you've achieved a certain level of success.
So having taken this deep dive into Felix Dennis's How to Get Rich, it is clear that his journey was unique, and his advice often went against the grain. The relentless drive, the laser focus on ownership, the willingness to embrace risk. It's a demanding approach, and perhaps not one that will appeal to everyone listening.
What's truly interesting for you to consider is that while the book offers a kind of practical roadmap to building wealth, it doesn't shy away from highlighting the significant sacrifices and potential downsides that can come with pursuing extreme riches. Ultimately, it brings us back to that fundamental question for you. Is that kind of relentless pursuit truly worth it in the end?
Exactly. And that's the thought we want to leave you with today. Has this deep dive given you a different way of looking at the pursuit of wealth? What are the trade-offs that you yourself are willing to consider? What truly drives your own ambitions? It's definitely something to think about as you continue on your own path. And just as a final image for you, it's worth remembering that in his later years, Felix Dennis did indeed dedicate a significant amount of his time to his poetry and to nurturing his extensive woodland in England, a very different kind of legacy than just his financial success.